What's going on, guys? We are back. Most of us are back for the final encounter talk. Not necessarily the final around the Hearth, but at long last we've made it from CR1, CR even like 1/3, all the way up to 20 plus, in conjunction with the mighty Inn of Planar Crossroads. We're joined today by Kane from that channel and Donald from this channel, as well as yours truly, and maybe a couple of other people will pop in on the Discord between here and there. We'll just have to see. But we got enough, so we're going to run it. Today we are talking about encounter design, as we've been talking about forever, by CR. Today we're in the realm of the 20 plus, we're in the realm of the mythic, the epic, the you have too much time on your hands and roll up another character. With no further ado, I'm going to go first on this thing, because this is a realm that I've played in a lot. All of the monsters I'm going to talk about today, I personally have used in encounters. And like, people will say that the power balance can get out of whack here. I say you just make your monsters come up along with it and you'll be just fine. I will say that if you don't bring your monsters up and your players have come up, if your players know it's a buy, they know how to optimize, they're going to look at the big bads and they're going to like throw their great axe 50 feet across the battlefield, and it's going to embed in Tulu's forehead, and then that's the fight, that's over with. So do be sure, if they have them, your monsters have the big six, your monsters, again, even like the CR20, CR30 guys, all have class levels if they need them, because this is still supposed to be challenging. The three monsters I talked about, well, I shouldn't call one of them a monster. The two monsters and one great old one I talked about from last week are the monsters I'm highlighting for this encounter. First, we'll talk about the one that kind of doesn't matter the least. It's kind of unfortunate that I say it that way, but this monster in the encounter exists solely as kind of a terrain effect, the Baylor. It's, again, like, if it has a slashing weapon, it has the Vorpal Strike ability. Any slashing weapon they wield, including the longsword and the whip they come out with, automatically have the Vorpal weapon quality, aka automatically have a 5% chance to lop your head off and kill you. Unfortunately, the only person I've ever done that to is a half construct who could survive without his head, and it was just kind of funny. But like we talked about in an old episode of Min-Maxing for Fun and Profit, when a Baylor dies, a Baylor explodes, a Baylor deals 100 points of damage to everything within 100 feet of it. Half of that is unholy damage, and the Baylors themselves are not immune to unholy damage, which is weird, because it doesn't actually like say it in their entry. Maybe you assume that like because they're non-good, they're not immune, but there are some monsters out there that say immune, unholy. So when I use my Baylors, though they are immune to fire, I make them not immune to unholy. And again, like we talked about at IOPC, the Baylors are there to just kind of be a stumbling block and kind of make sure the players, because they will exist, the players who know how to build a little better than some of the other ones can be kept in check. Because if like Grognar the Barbarian and his +5 Vorpal Keen, that's too many enchantments on a weapon, you get the idea. Great Sword just is cleaving through these Baylors, he's hurting the party in the process, and that means he has to check himself. Even if these Baylors come into the encounter with like one, god, if they came into the encounter with 1 hit point, that makes them even better. Again, these guys are just here for pure explosion factor, in combination with the big, bad, evil guy of your particular campaign. Or he wasn't necessarily my campaign's big bad, he was one of them. There were a lot of big, bad, evil guys. So he's important, we'll get to him in a second. The second monster I talked about, I'm probably still mispronouncing this. It's Chinese, I think it's Hundun from Bestiary 5. These guys, if you didn't catch us over at In a Planar Crossroads, and really you should, because that's half the conversation, excuse me, and there's a lot of other great content on that channel as well. These guys have a really creepy quarterstaff with hearts and entrails and stuff hanging from it, appropriately called the Strange Attractor. It hovers in place, and they can mentally move it up to 60 feet through space. It stops moving if it hits a creature, then that creature makes a DC 31 will save. If they fail the save, they fall unconscious. If they pass the save, they're nauseated. Either way, they're out of combat for a round. In addition, it functions like a reverse gravity well. The attractor has a repulsion on it. Creatures within 60 feet who are attempting to move away from it are prevented from doing so, and they waste their move actions. Some people can pass those saves. Those saves are real high, but the people that can't, the people that roll bad, are essentially just locked out of the game. My last encounter, and well, when I say last encounter, the last encounter in a campaign I ran, the party went up against Cthulhu, and I put 4 of these guys in with him, in addition to the hit dice he had and all of the, I think he had like 7,000 hit points at the end of the day. The party knew what they were doing. But it was these guys that made everything shine, because these guys are just throwing their strange attractors all around this place where the party's standing, whacking them in the face and stuff. And it's causing people to lose their actions, and by now, we've all probably learned that it's action economy that's king in Pathfinder. If the bad guys have more actions than the good guys do, the bad guys are at an advantage and probably come off pretty well. In addition, these guys also have improved unarmed strike. They have the dimensional feats, which means they can, essentially, they can Nightcrawler. They can bounce around when they cast Dimension Door, and they flank with themselves as they dance around the party, punching you in the face. But the piece de resistance of this encounter, probably my favorite of the CR 20 plus monsters. Well, that's a bit of a stretch. I like a lot of them. Probably my favorite, though, at least, or in the top 5, is Bokrug the Water Lizard, a CR 27 reptile with a, well, not reptile, an iguana, I'll say, with a scorpion tail and a creepy Cthulhu beard. This guy, in the encounter, he shows up. We're going to assume you're in Bokrug's domain, and you start the encounter with your once-a-day Tsunami, which you can cast at Mythic because you're in your realm, because you're you. Tsunami creates a gigantic wave of water that runs in a straight line across wherever you select. We selected, obviously we have Bokrug pop up and hit the party with this, and probably even some of the Baylors, let the Baylors take some damage, and then again, Baylors explode, Baylors become more of a hazard, and a hazard that I guess, like, God forbid they hit that natural 20 and there goes the Druid's head. That's why we prepare Regenerate, I suppose. Anything that's struck by the Tsunami takes 8d6 points of damage, and then you make a CMB, and his CMB as a gigantic monster is, oh, I forget, it's really high. It's not like player character stuff. It's a, where is it? A plus 46, so a lot of the party is going to get grabbed by this, which will knock them prone, and it carries them along the wave. The wave travels, I forget how far the wave travels. It travels really far, though. I think it travels at 60 feet per round on land or underwater. So you hit them with this, and then every round, that's 60 feet this way, they're taking more damage. They're underwater, so they're holding their breath or they're drowning. At this level, they probably all have a bajillion con, and so they're fine. But the wizard doesn't. The wizard who's been ignoring his con is in trouble, and if he can't make the concentration check to, like, Dimension Door out, Freedom of Movement out, blah 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 out, it's a good way to, like, start picking off members of the party. Doubly so, again, with strange attractors slapping you in the face, so you lose your actions. I imagine the Hundans actually would have their strange attractors move with the wave to keep the party stuck in it, because otherwise you kind of, like, divide by 0 as the wave is pushing this way and the attractor is pulling this way. It's a giant mess. Whoever survives that, and this lasts for 5 rounds, it didn't give me the Mythic variant. I'm not exactly sure. I know I used the Mythic variant when I did this. I am going to make sure I don't miss anything super crazy about Mythic Tsunami before we go to, like, how cool this guy is. That might have actually been Mythic Tsunami. Now I'm not sure. Well, regardless, it's a bigger spell. It hurts faces. It's really good. And then when people survive it, and people will, Bokrug himself has poison with his stinger, so he's making you make a fort save, and if he crits you with his sting, you get injected with 3 doses of the poison at once, which bumps the DC up by 4. The DC, like, at the outset of it, before even the bump, is a, where is it? It's a DC 41, so it's a 45 if he crits you. It's 2d4 wisdom damage, so it hurts your will save. and that means you can throw the attractor at people to keep knocking them out. A creature that makes a melee attack against Bokrug, assuming they don't have a reach weapon, and they might. It kind of depends on party composition. Has to make a DC 33 reflex save, or they get struck by these spines on this gigantic, scary Cthulhu iguana's body that pop out in reaction to him. And if the Great Old One is above water, he's surrounded by a 30-foot radius cloud of invisible poison. And that poison causes you to make a DC 41 will save if you're within that 30-foot radius at the start of your turn, or you're confused for a round. Which means that, like, there's 5 or 6 different ways in this encounter before we even talk about Bokrug's spell-like abilities or the Hundun's spell-like abilities to just lock people out of the party. There's also Bokrug, like all the Great Old Ones, has a thing called Unspeakable Presence. A DC 33 will save causes you to take a -4 penalty on attack rolls, saving throws, ability checks, skill checks, and weapon damage rolls as long as you're within the, like, 300 feet of him, I think. Yeah, so even before the fight is started, you're assuming you fail. The party's worse and worse at the things they're doing to survive. I'm not sure if Joe made it. I'm going to pop over to Discord, because if he didn't make it, he didn't make it. Okay, so I will point out as a quick, like, honorable mention on behalf of Joseph Harvilla, the Imperial Lord Vildius makes a really, really, really close second in my mind for, like, who is the most powerful. I guess Cthulhu is there too, because Cthulhu can just, it's like a DC 40 save or die if you're within like 100 feet of him, but that's boring. Vildius has an ability, oh, I forget what it's called. Whenever Vildius would be affected by a bleed effect, this is her primal aura, all enemies within 30 feet of her gain that bleeding condition instead. With no save, the heal DC to stop that bleeding is 25. That's not that crazy until you think about her weapon, Cicatrix. Anytime Cicatrix deals damage, the wielder, like if she throws it, and she can, the creature struck, it takes a DC 25 will save, and if they fail, they instantly know the creature's alignment. They can, like Vildius knows the alignment, Vildius can listen to its thoughts. But that's not necessarily what we're looking for. The thing is, Cicatrix has the vicious property, which, no, that's not what it is. Dang it, Joe, you're supposed to show up. I forget how this works. I used Vildius in an encounter, and there's a way she has, I am so prepared, to make herself bleed, and then she's affecting everybody with her effect, and it's a big amount of bleed damage. Cicatrix itself puts 1 point of bleed damage on, that's it. Okay, so then she essentially, it's kind of morbid and kind of rude, but she spends a full round action essentially just cutting herself with Cicatrix and stacking all this bleed damage up. And then everybody else with no save gets that bleed effect. So how I used her was I would have just random little portals the size of like a piece of gum open somewhere where the party couldn't see. She would attack herself, she would get a bunch of bleed damage, and the party is suddenly bleeding out their ears and eyes and nose and stuff. Nobody knew what was going on. I had a cleric of Vildius in the party who was actually played by Joe. And he knew eventually, we figured it out, and they did fight Vildius. But it's a really good way to start the fight before the fight has started. And that's what makes it really powerful. Before we even think about the fact that she can smite evil, and she can cast heal, and she can cast holy word and pain strike and all this other crazy stuff. Anywho, I've gone on long enough. Let us, Joe's still in here, fair enough. We will pass to Donald. Donald, take us to your big fancy end of campaign encounter.
The two monsters that I be covering, these are roughly the same type of monster. CR20 Umbral Dragon and Red Dragon Great Worm. These dragons are what you expect. High AC, a lot of hit points. Generally, if you're using dragons properly, you need to use them in their own actual environment with the proper minion and proper tactics to make them to be quite effective against the optimized party, because generally dragons, unless if you give them max hit points for the encounter, a very optimized paladin can easily kill a CR20 or CR22 monster very easily. Just this week, I GM'd a session and a player he used Smite Evil and he did over 400 damage to kill the baddie in one turn effectively because he critted and did max damage. So these big creatures, you need to use them effectively if you're going to have them last more than one round. So using all their abilities, it is essential. The dragons, they get a nice selection of abilities based upon how prepared the party is. You may or may not get to use all of these powers. So this is where knowing the party, it is essential if half of these spells these dragons have is going to be useful or not. With the good thing about GMing, you can easily change these dragons up a bit to make them a bit more tougher based upon what the party consists of. So give them the big 6 or any other necessary modification. The good thing about the Umbral Dragon, besides its burst attack doing a lot of damage, 20d8 negative energy, which can be easily be countered by Death Ward or having straight immunity to negative energy if you're went with the Death Domain. The Shadow Breath for the Umbral Dragon, if you use it properly, that character, he have a 10 strength rate. If you use that on someone who have a terrible strength score, such as the Wizard, the Sorcerer, or anyone like that, that's going to cause problems right away. So dragons, if you use them, it is important to know who you need to go after first to make the fight a bit more easier. Generally, when I GM big villains that are powerful, they go after the weakest party member first. That is going to cause them a major pain down the turn order effectively. So wizards, clerics, and anything like that. My CR29 monster I'd be using is Moloch. He's a archdevil. If you're going to be using Moloch properly, you would probably be encountering him in his lair of hell, which would be known as Malabog. He would have a lot of pit fiends and devils under his command. The one thing that I like about his arrow he have is go out to 120 feet, and the DC is 38 against a frightful presence, and someone is going to fail that save for sure, especially those who have a terrible will save, but even optimizing that. The deity, he have a lot of hit points, good AC, and stats of a DD effectively. He's a melee type of combatant, so if you give him the big 6 items, he can easily do over 300 damage in a turn potentially. So that is something you could use to your advantage potentially to counter the big DPS characters of the group if he folds full round attack. He have some pretty nice, interesting abilities that I like. Swallow Whole, if he does swallow someone, the DC just ticks up. So every single time that the party member is in Moloch's stomach, you take 20d6 damage per turn. And if you fail the DC, you cannot do nothing on your turn effectively. And if you do fail the DC go up by 4 every single turn. So 43 becomes 43, 43 becomes 47, 47 becomes 51, 51 becomes 55, to the point that the party member is going to be dead real soon. He have a nice power called Infernal Fortress, so he can, once per day, he can summon himself an instant fortress to be above the party, which is quite nice. The deity have a incinerate power, so whenever he does hit a party member and it's reduced down to 0 hit points, they need to make a fortitude save, or they are instantly turned to ash. DC 38. And you need Miracle, True Wish, Wish, type of spell to counter this if you want to bring them back. A DC 38, that's a pretty high DC to beat at the CR unless you optimize. And one of its other unique aura it is Fiendish Furnace. Each time that the creatures stay in a 10 feet radius of him, they take 2d8 hellfire damage per turn. No saves, which is quite nice. His weapon of choice, it is a Adamite Unholy Vorpal Battle Axe and a +3 Animatic Cruel Unholy Wounding Longsword. And he can summon these to his side. Even if you do destroy them, he can summon them again, which is quite nice. He has a list of spells that is more of controlling the party member, that effectively Mass Charm Monster, Mass Hold Person, Fireball, Greater Dispel Magic, Greater Teleport, Order Rast, so a bunch of great debuff spells if they are used properly. If you are worrying their DC is too low at the CR, just give the DC a higher DC, like adding a +4 if need be, to make these spells have at least a 50-50 chance of succeeding on the party members. Generally, when it comes to deities, the fight should be epic, because if you started off from a low level and ended at, say, level 30, this should be a great accomplishment to kill a deity, or at least send them back to their plane. And that is my 2 cents on the creatures.
Fair enough. Yeah, a couple things I should point out also at this point. Assuming it's not a one-shot, assuming you've played with this party for a while, and I hope you have, because the experiences of a campaign from 1 to 20 plus are really unique and really rewarding. You gotta remember to pick out like monsters that will always be better against the party to challenge them, because essentially we're playing a game of rock, paper, scissors as like GMs versus players. For example, another reason I like Bokrug is because Bokrug is chaotic neutral, which means the paladin can't smite him, and I had a bunch of paladins in the party, so they're like, okay, I smite the great old one, and then you get to look at him and you get to say, it doesn't work, and it takes away some of their buffs. By that notion, also, and I will say I do like Moloch's flavor a lot, that being the bronze bull from Carthaginian history and like Greek and Egyptian stuff. It's so sweet. Being
also a general of hell.
Yeah, also that's pretty good.
You can play up as well. As a player and as a GM, he is one of my favorite deities if I need to go for a martial type of character or NPC.
Yeah, Moloch is super mean. Also, I'll note, I read in a guide once, I haven't really got to test this out, but based on what I've played, I think I can support it. You want to, like, Pathfinder says a mythic encounter is your CR +4, but we've said it a million times in this series. Here's the one more time before we round it out. CR is an arbitrary unit, but if you want to go by it, assume that an optimized party is challenged at the beginning. Treat CR +4 as like the normal CR encounter for them. So if your monster is a CR 21 Baylor, bring it out at level 17. Don't wait for level 20, then here's the Baylor. Even then you could bring it out at like 15, 14, for example. I used the great old one Haster against a bunch of level 15 players, and they wrecked him really fast, a lot faster than I thought they would. Though the dungeon leading up to him was a lot of fun, and I think Haster is better for that arena than for the arena of like the outright fight. Nevertheless, don't be afraid to go like way high into the CR range, because sometimes you just have to. I digress. Kane, do you have anything you'd like to bring up? I know you said you weren't super prepared, but I know you know how to do encounters and stuff because you've GM'd for me in the past.
Okay. So, I don't have like a monster for this week. I haven't actually even gotten around to watching your CR video at the end of Planar Crossroads from last week because, like I said, I've just been busy. But what I will say about running encounters at CR 20 and above is I'm actually on the opposite end of the scale from you, Tommy. I've only ever gotten a character all the way to 20th, maybe once or twice in the entire, like, 13 years I've been playing tabletop games, 13 plus, however long. It's been a while. And feel free to, like, interrupt me if I say some shit that you disagree with.
Oh, no, you're fine. You did get to play Ignatius. I GM'd for a GM 20, for a level 20 alchemist that you played.
I'm a GM 20 with I'm statted for strength.
Yeah, there you go. It's one of those days.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tom.
One thing I can say, GMing level 20 encounters is definitely a interesting experience firsthand to actually experience and actually preparing it, because it's different from, say, a CR3 encounter than a CR 15.
By that same notion, like high level encounters like this are one of the reasons that I always let natural ones be really bad, because otherwise at CR 20 plus, like, you're walking gods, avatars of whatever, the best fighter in the entire inner sea region or the setting of your choice. You still got to have that ability to screw up, and that's why for one, I'm really happy to see the 4 degrees of success in 2nd edition coming around, and natural ones are now not a house rule, now it's a flat rule. Because again, like, otherwise the party's just gonna walk through stuff.
I don't know if I've ever played with a party that'll walk through a DC 40 fortitude save, but fair enough. I
could dig out some of my character sheets. I could dig out, like, my Black Dragon Disciple. I don't remember exactly what his fort save was, but he had paladin levels, I'll say that.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, and I mean, like, also that, like, you take into assumption that people are playing with optimized parties, and a lot of people are, because Pathfinder really is a game that it does a lot to reward you for building your character in heavy air quotations properly. But like I said, what I will say about running encounters at CR 20 plus is, like you mentioned, Tommy, if you've been running these characters from, like, level 1 all the way to level 20 or level 3 to 20, wherever you started, and you've built this big long story, there's probably a fair chance you know who you're about to fight, and if you're playing smart, you've done a little research, or as much research as you can, but you also have to assume that this CR whatever monster, assuming you're not fighting like a kaiju or something, also has some pre-existing knowledge of you. And there's no reason that monster or being or, you know, leveled up dude that you're fighting is gonna play fair with you. So, you know, at level 20 whatever, expect traps and ambushes, and, you know, if necessary, like a whole dungeon leading up to that final encounter that you have to work your way through, expending resources along the way, so that when you get to him you're not at full strength. Encounters at CR 20 and above are endurance tests for a lot of different reasons, and for really, I think, no reason more so than any other, because there's so much math at play. Like, the numbers just get so big, the hit points are so big, the saves are huge, the ACs are potentially huge, that there's going to be a lot of back and forth where you're just knocking chunks out of each other. It's very, very anime at CR 20 plus.
Yeah, that is for sure. Actually, another big scary monster that I used once upon a time that I just suddenly remembered was really good is, well, I remembered it because you said kaiju. The kaiju Mogaru, who is our Pathfinder equivalent of Godzilla, at CR 28 is so good. I might be a little biased because it was a party of alchemists that fought him and they never figured out how one of the abilities worked. I'll explain it here now. It's called Absorb Energy. Mogaru absorbs energy attacks that damage him, including negative energy. Damage blocked by one of his resistances or immunities, so that's he resists acid, cold, electricity, negative energy, and sonic. He is immune to fire, and I think that's the only ability he's outright immune to, yeah.
Another thing to add, when it comes to creatures CR20 plus, don't be afraid to throw templates onto them to make them even tougher.
Sometimes you gotta. But like I was saying, if he blocks any kind of energy damage, he absorbs it, it heals him, and that sets the type of energy damage for the round. And I put him up against, well, I put him up against a bunch of stuff. What we did was we had the capital city of Osirion, Sothis, had found a way to get to planet Earth, which is in like 1923, in like the equivalent from Galarion to there. So you had gnolls and biplanes, and you had like mummies driving tanks and lots of flamethrowers and stuff. And I decided I was going to bring just all of the big scaries I could and just wreck Sothis. For those of us who don't know all of the lore, Sothis is built under the shell of a giant beetle. That giant beetle is known as Ulanat, and it's one of, like, up there with the Tarask, it's one of the spawn of Rovagug. This thing wakes up, the elemental lord of fire, which is powering an airship, gets free, and suddenly Mogaru shows up. They all start tearing into each other. And then I have all these alchemists, and they all start full attacking with their bombs at level 20 plus, and they're doing fire damage, and I'm like, okay, that doesn't break his immunity, or that doesn't break his resistance, and I'm just sitting there quietly healing myself. As, like, what else? I think there was a monk there. The monk is punching him, and then the alchemist is healing him back to full. It was really, really powerful, and this guy has a 1,200-foot-long breath weapon, or a 600-foot-long cone, which does, even like before the 20d6 points of force damage that staggers you, that's 1,200 feet or 600 feet. That hits whatever you want it to. It's really, 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 really good. And the first time in any round that Mogaru can make an attack of opportunity, he can use a little baby version of the breath weapon instead. I think this guy also had something that was like, oh god, what else did he have? There was an ability, I can't think of what the ability was called. It was like he couldn't attack and you could climb him. I think it's like a special kaiju ability. The point is, it was a lot of fun to pull it off, and I'm now seeing, I didn't realize how powerful this was. When I used him, he also has ferocity on top of the bajillions of hit points you're healing. He had, what is my con score? 41. So there's a lot of, oh, I'm dying. Oh, the alchemist screwed up. Now I'm back to full. And you just kind of keep looping forever and ever.
Mogara does have one of, like, an ability that interacts with a mechanic that almost never gets used, though.
The susceptible to song thing?
Yeah. You get that level, you get your level 20 bard up in there using his suggestion ability on the huge Godzilla monster.
And then suddenly you have the huge Godzilla monster. We had a bard in that party, but that bard was somewhere else at the time, I think, or they didn't figure it out, and so the bard is... No, the bard was in a different part of the world at the time.
Mm-hmm.
This is another interesting, unique power that the Archdevil Barbados have. Festering fails. Whenever a creature it is hit by this and they fail their fortune save, to remove the disease, especially if you prefer to use a instant debuff type of the disease, you have to overcome Barbados spell resistant first before you attempt to even remove the disease based upon the disease you use. That could be even a challenge upon itself, so you have to go through effectively 2 or 3 loopholes just to remove it. And Barbados SR, it is 37, so unless if you build to beat that SR easily enough, you're going to have a problem most of the time for a not optimized caster.
And not to mention, if you're not a caster and you get hit with that, my caster level is 0. I'm throwing a d20 at the table and I'm hoping my GM is merciful.
I mean, there are ways to beat a SR 37 by meta magic feat and then beats to get it.
Yeah, for sure. You totally can. But what I'm saying is, like, if you use, and truthfully, I didn't know this about Barbados. I know the Archdevils are strong, but I've never really, like, with the exception of 1 or 2, I've never really dove in and be like, what does that guy do? If Barbados hits somebody who's not a caster with that, like the barbarian, the fighter, everyone, they just can't get rid of that disease, right? Is that not how that works? Short of the GM being really nice about natural 20s?
Yes, yes. You have to roll very well to have a chance to remove it. So this is a interesting power that he have. It's the same thing for a lot of the DD at this CR. They have unique unique powers, debuff or unique buff or debuffs that they can easily hand out, such as the Demon Lord Nocturcula. She could give anyone a +6 to any of their stats for free, along as the mortal was willing to accept it, and +4 to all their saves effectively.
Isn't Nocturcula the like Demon Lord of Succubi? Isn't that correct?
Yes.
I didn't realize she had stats. This is why you look at Wrath of the Righteous, guys, because it has all the Demon Lords.
I mean, she is like a CR 30. Currently using her for a long-term campaign. Mostly.
Yeah, also, speaking of unique abilities and stuff, I feel like if your end game is in like CR 25 plus, it's something the party should kind of know about early-ish on. Like probably like before level 10, they should know that
you're fighting this guy.
Towards by the time you hit max, you're gonna run into the Mantis God. Like, it's gonna happen. Like, find some books, man. Like,
that's pretty much exactly what's going on in Lordly Caliber. Xandu has met his. Pogue has kind of met his. Pogue doesn't know who, but Pogue has met his. Who else? Francis and Lucia. I know Francis's kind of came together in my head at work. Lucia's is a little harder. I don't necessarily want it to be Rat. I want Rat to be something to tip my hand to two of the players in Lordly Caliber, I guess. I want Rat to be something that the party has to overcome, so Rat will be stronger than things in the bestiary, but there will be something that Lucia has to fight and something Francis has to fight by themselves from the bestiary that's CR 20+. And that sounds really scary, but if the player has had several levels to prepare for it, like Xandu had, I pretty much knew as soon as Xandu came down exactly what I was going to do for Xandu. Xandu's story in my head just kind of like unfolded immediately. And I'm like, okay, I'll grab this great old one, whose name I won't say. You guys, well, you've heard me use words. You can metagame if you want. You won't ever fight him. But Xandu will by himself. Again, sounds super scary, but if Xandu builds big air quotes correctly, and he will because the party knows how to optimize, and Xandu has known since level like 6 or 7 that this thing has an interest in him, he's coming in with a humongous advantage, which means he's going to be able to walk all over it. It's going to be the same thing with Francis. It's going to be the same thing with Enderlings. Has been Joe is really good at Pathfinder as far as optimization goes, so his is a little harder. At first, I wanted to use, like, there is a monster in Bestiary 6 called an Ouroboros, which is just like an ethereal plane snake that can turn you into a snake, but that's boring, and Enderling will eat it for breakfast. So Enderlings is a little harder for me to put together, but the point I'm driving at here is the party is always going to be a little stronger than the Bestiary because of the abilities that players get. The players can, well, I guess the monsters can too, and so can the NPCs, but the players are the ones that get to make choices. The players are the ones who are like, well, I'd like to try this, and that's how, like, really the true, not to put too much of an anime spin on it, but like true power, that's where that comes from.
Yeah, like, and that's kind of what I'm worried about, because Francis is not an optimized druid.
But Francis is still a druid, and thus he's really powerful.
Entirely true. Francis is still one of like the best 3 classes in the game.
Yeah, druids are real good.
My only issue is generally, traditionally, the wizard is quite the squishy class against anything by itself.
I have given you your intelligence to your hit points.
Yes, I mean,
and your saves.
Yeah, you got some gnarly buffs going on.
And you have a birthday in like 5 days, I think.
True.
So.
I mean, even then, hit point saves, that is nice, but that hit points can be reduced pretty quickly, and AC, not that great.
You're still the full caster. You're still like, you'll cast big, scary spell. Also, this is probably a good time to tell you, I've been thinking about it. And the reason originally that I wanted you guys to use the troop template on your summons was because in my head, and because I guess this is like my necromantic headcanon, That sounds like a bad, like, post-hardcore band. But it's like my necromantic headcanon that Lucia was going to have, like, 50 zombies. And that's why I wanted troop templates. I think I'm going to renege that. If you can make sure the rolls come down fast, that dragon can full attack. That dragon can have everything it has.
Okay, cool.
But after I retrain all of my summoning feats, Tommy.
You can retrain them backwards, but you were summoning, like, 5 or 6 water elementals.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair.
And that's why.
Yep, just for action economy, just having one undead servant, it is enough. I'm finally going to have an undead dragon. Not a lot of people can say they actually got to make an undead dragon.
I did it once. It was kind of crappy. I didn't put a bunch of templates on it, though. I was just like...
Having just the 1 or 2 is honestly mechanically the best. Usually, I think what I went for when I did it back in 3.5 was 2 fire giants. Was mechanically about the best you could do.
Nice. Yeah, I've read some necromancy guides, but I don't have like any real understanding of the class because I've never just dove in. And I guess this is a good time for like the discussion to point out that even at high level play, mooks are still really important. Some members of the party can buff their touch. For example, my favorite Magus archetype, the Kensai, will have a crazy touch armor class, but a lot of people will still be, well, you'll buff your dex. It might be like 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, but...
Yeah, but even then...
Shadows will still get there. Greater shadows still exist, and they will still drain your strength. Orcs still have ferocity, and you can buff them. They're still good stumbling blocks. I actually remember way back in the day, Joe was GMing, and I didn't have to deal with this, thankfully for Tommy. But one of the players were like defending a house from an army of essentially like the Book of Revelations, and he had like size category medium 15 or 14 hit dice Baylors come in, and it just kind of goes back to like even the Clockwork Dragon, these guys will cost the party something. It's not just like I'm gonna bonk it with my hammer and then move forward about your day.
Well, if you get a bunch of those Baylors like bulked up together in a choke point, you can't domino them off each other.
Yeah. Okay, maybe don't do that. They have greater teleport. I'm pretty sure they can get around it.
Another thing.
Well, if none of it all happens in the same round,
just burn them. Everyone's dead.
Another thing to add to mooks, they can easily be as dangerous as the big baddie, especially if you use the auto hit rules.
Yeah, for
sure. Yeah, from troops, exactly. Like if you're, because we dealt with that during the fight with the divs. Just those swarms of soldiers and I think a couple swarms of divs.
Yeah.
That would just move into our squares and deal automatic damage. It wasn't as bad as it could have been because I think I locked down all of the human soldiers in that entangle spell.
Thirsting entanglement is real scary.
Yeah,
especially when you have like 12 on, just dead.
I think I might go for the thorny entanglement from now on though, because it can hit things at range.
Ugh, that sounds terrifying.
I am psyched when I do actually level up in the prestige class, Agent of the Grave. I actually get to begin to affect undead creatures based on their original monster type before being undead, so I can use any mind altering spell or any spell to affect that base type still.
Yeah, you guys probably won't fight a whole lot of undead though, unless like Lucia gets it into her head. Now, granted, if Lucia decides she's gonna make 5 dragons, then we're going back to troop rules. But like if Lucia brings forth a thing and then that thing declares independence and tries to kill her, that's great. But the bad guys have converted to Sarenrae worship. The bad guys, well, they might have undead. That might be fun.
Well, no, but the Rat Lich would count as
oh yeah,
lich.
Yeah, I am doing that, aren't I? Oh god.
Yeah, the Lich would be undead unless you use a variant type of Lich that say they're not undead.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah,
that hold monster is starting to look real appeasing.
Hold monster always looks appeasing, and that's another reason why you should use mooks in your high-level encounters, because this is Pathfinder. If the party knows what they're doing, it's still like the witch has cackled and everyone has advantage forever, and then she slumbers, or she hold persons, or she whatever it is, and then they're paralyzed, and then here comes the...
I don't think the cackle gives you advantage.
Doesn't it? No, it's not. It's fortune and then you cackle. I've never actually done this on a witch, but the idea is you stay within 30 feet of the party and you fortune everyone prior to the combat, and you move action cackle, and then like whatever your standard action is, so everyone just is great at what they do.
Tommy,
it's a pretty long-lasting just bonus to everything.
Tommy, I will probably just max myself to 2 undead just due to the cost alone.
2 undead equals troops, though.
Yep, true. I mean, it'd probably be a general useful undead I could use by then, but making undead is pretty expensive. Just to make the undead dragon, it costs me about 14,000 gold.
Yeah. I guess that's another thing we should point out for high-level encounters. Attrition can and should, at this point, especially like if this is the last encounter of the game, it can and should include the party's gear. This happened to me. This was the last session of the game that has crashed and burned, and now is featured on this channel, known as A House Divided, and most of the players are here today. I was playing now he's a Gestalt Paladin synthesist. Before he was a Slayer, and we do a lot of crazy convoluted things, and you guys have seen some of those crazy convoluted things already in the bar, session 1. But
it's just a TARDIS bar. I'm not worried about it.
You'd be worried about it because it was that last session. We're trying to find a place for everybody to, like, in a besieged city, to find his refuge, and Joe likes sci-fi. I'll tell you to that now. He put a Stargate in an Aslanti city, and we used that Stargate, to get to Namek.
Joe likes sci-fi?
Yeah, he does.
Wow. I never would have guessed with the bar that was bigger on the inside with a fucking Cardassian at the front.
Again, wait till you see the Saiyans, because what he did was, in addition to my witch getting just like punched in the gut to death in 1, he had this guy. I had a +4 keen great axe with homebrew powers, which is now just a shard of an axe on Sinvolka's neck, that this Saiyan just comes out and just punches, and it explodes. A lot of the guys in like high-level play, and this goes back to saying, even at level 1, read your stat blocks, know what you can do, because it feels really bad to be like, oh, I could have done this whole time. I had power attack. No. I kind of wish Paizo in their monster entries would be like, attack with power attack, and just have it listed there. But what I'm getting at is a lot of stuff will have the Sunder feats, and if it doesn't have the Sunder feats, its reach is greater than the party's reach, and it probably has a crazy CMB, so like, smash the Belt of Physical Perfection, steal the Vorpal Greatsword. What else can you? Trip the person, because you can trip them, why not? The point is, attrition is good, taxing is good, and if you know, like, somebody has invested all this time, like fighters in particular, in Kensai, and anybody... I prefer the Agile Enchantment more than I prefer Slashing Grace, because I don't like giving my feats up, but if I've put the Agile Enchantment on my weapon and have 7 strength and 18 dex and no finesse weapon, and suddenly my weapon's broken, I'm really bad.
Yeah, I actually gave up my first 2 fighter bonus feats in that archetype, so I'm already behind.
You don't need them. We just need to roll better, and we give you a tankard. It'll be great. That was a good session. Another thing you can use in high-level play, I guess it goes back to the attrition, but this is a little nicer. Never underestimate the power of an anti-magic field, because that shuts everything off forever. That stops people summoning. It's the bane of the synthesist summoner if the synthesist walks into the anti-magic field and suddenly is like Tony Stark, not Iron Man, more or less. It's real bad.
At higher CRs, if you use curses, especially greater curses, properly, they can be quite the great debuff.
Well, and curses don't just have to be mechanically what they say they are in the book, because they also tell you that if you can generate an effect of similar strength, it could be whatever. Like, every time you sit down, you vomit. Like, it could be anything.
The curse of standing. Sounds bad. I guess one thing also we should bring up before,
you wouldn't think about it until you have to go somewhere where you need to sit.
Or you have to, like, go to the bathroom. Oh, no. Oh, real bad. I guess another thing we should bring up, and I've never really... Like, I've never been the victim of this as a GM, because my players are nice. And in Lordly Caliber, there will be some kind of restriction on Wish and on Miracle. I don't know what yet, because again, I've never really been the subject to it, but be aware that that spell exists if you have, well, you probably were aware for a couple levels if you have a wizard, because now he's suddenly really, really powerful and has a demiplane and has all this other stuff. And it's okay to say that, especially if you're new and the party has gotten up to this point and you're not ready, it's fine to say that things don't work or can't happen. Because Pathfinder has a little thing that's called the power creep. And this is the end of the power creep. The power train has pulled into the power station. Now we're like an 80s hair metal band. The point is,
Tommy,
like,
I'm still waiting on us to start a band called Necromancy Headcanon.
Tommy, I was reading Wish, the description of it back in 2nd edition. Wish, unless if it's precisely worded to get the designated or desired result, you as a GM can easily twist this around.
I made a player so salty with that. You guys have watched Dragon Ball, right?
It's just like it's just like the Jin's Wish. It's just Monkey Paw.
Yeah.
It should always be Monkey Paw. If you're not, we should get Joseph is gonna have a law degree. We just have to get him to write all of our wishes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I remember way back in the day, I had players that weren't as, like, I won't say professional, but they were terrible. And I gave them a Jin, knowing the Jin was going to give them 3 wishes, and I knew I was going to screw him. And the first thing out of the Ranger's mouth, because they were really big into Dragon Ball Z, was he asked for everybody back on the planet Namek to be alive. I nodded my head once, and he got very mad, as a wish that literally did nothing resolved, and he didn't get it. And he's like, well, fine, then I wish for the world's softest pair of underwear. Quoting, God, what's the pig's name? Oolong from Dragon Ball. And then suddenly his Elf Ranger had the nicest pair of underwear. He was incredibly mad, and I guess I feel a little bad about it, but it's fine to do that, like, twist these things.
Don't fuck with Jin. Don't do it.
Just don't.
You knew. He told you. Hey, this is Jin, you got 3 wishes, be careful. Don't say dumb shit in front of him.
One thing that I had learned reading about devils in manga and in fiction, in fiction, is if you're dealing with them, be as precise and as direct, because generally lawyers of that type, they always like to twist the words around.
Yeah, oh yeah, they do. Especially like if you're dealing with Mephistopheles, or I can't think of any of the really powerful archdevils off the top of my head. Well, Mephistopheles is the big one, and I think he has effects like Wish.
Yes, all the archdevils have the wish spell.
I do want to say one last thing about top level CRs or top level encounters is never be afraid to go off book. This is the end of the game. This is as big as it gets. If you got some, you've got some crazy shit that you've been wanting to throw at the party for the last, 10 levels, and you've been like, no, that's weird, that's dumb, it'll just kill them. Just do it. Just do it. Just put that. You don't even need to write it down. Just understand in your brain, get a rough idea how it works, and just throw that shit out there.
Kane's not wrong. It's like, this is the time where you don't hold, like I'm sitting here saying, I felt bad because I made a wish go bad, but by that same token, don't pull your punches. If nothing else, it's a learning experience for you to like brew your own stuff, to put your own things together. And really, a lot of stuff, there are monsters in Pathfinder that are stronger than others. There are also some monsters in Pathfinder that are just kind of terrible and weak. And one of them, maybe it was just my experience with them. Maybe, I don't know. I'm going to bring him up anyway, though, because it would feel really wrong if we ended a high CR encounter talk without bringing up the Tarask from all the way back in, I don't even know how far back, at least 3.0 is how far back the Tarask comes from.
Like, earlier.
And now he's the
Tarask
Herald of
shows up
Rovagog.
in, like, fucking AD&D you can find.
Yeah, fair enough. But like I'm saying, now he's the Herald of a God. The players, when I used the Tarask, and I had him show up at the end of a fight with a bunch of Baylors, and then here's the Tarask running at you, and the Ubercharger's Ubercharged and smote evil. And then he was done, and then somebody had that wish at the end to, like, deal with him. Because if he dies, he rises from death 3 rounds later, and then he starts Like his massive regeneration, I think it's like 40 over nothing can shut it off. Yeah. He's strong, but he's not as strong as anything in your imagination.
No, the problem with the Tarrasque is that there's nobody keep him down. Like there's literally nothing that stops him from regenerating after you've put him down. But you are right. Like he's only got an AC of 40, so your full base attack characters are going to hit that on like a 2. He's got less than 600 hit points, so even just under that same idea, your full base attack bonus characters are going to swing out like anywhere between 50 and 200 damage around on this thing. Like it's not. I've played barbarians that could probably knock this thing down in a round or a round and a half.
At this CR, a optimized character can easily solo a boss fight by themselves.
And that's one reason I think that sometimes your end of game encounters have to be those optimized characters. I guess I'll tip one more tidbit of Lordly Caliber as we're at what, 54, so we got like 5 minutes left. There are going to be NPCs in that game that are stronger than things in the bestiary, stronger certainly than the Tarrasque. The party has met 2 of them, I think. Yeah, the party has met 2 people in the game who are, well, 3 people in the game who are going to have more than 30 hit dice, who are going to be built to the T, and they come partially from my mind, partially from, like, powerful
Ogre
archetypes.
Battle 64.
Oh, yeah, that too. We actually, fun fact, we got content ID'd for the music that we used at, God, he called it a Nation Divided. Now he's calling it House. So what I've done is I've uploaded a bunch of Ogre Battle music on YouTube, and it's scheduled to release in like a week, and I want to see if I get content ID'd for it to see if we can use it. But as I was saying, these NPCs from Ogre Battle 64, a wonderful RPG in and of itself, have like 30 plus class levels, and they're the real challenge, because that's like Paizo feeds the players. Paizo gives you the ability to build all these crazy things that are built to handle the Tarrasque, that are built to Cthulhu lasted around. He's really strong. It's a huge saver die, and I got the fighters. I killed a fighter, and I killed an Arcanist to attacks of opportunity. But everybody else is just like, okay, and then Cthulhu died. Well, died. He's one of those that comes back as well. But the point is,
games also kind of have the issue of player action economy being way in their favor.
Yeah, for sure.
6, 7 players, or the
another
3
thing
sessions we did with 9 people.
And that was sweet. I love having that many players. And if you want to have that many characters, like the barbarian that's doing 600 damage when he's full attack, well, not full attack, vital striking for max damage, or the uber charger that's uber charging, or magi that are called shotting the vitals to insta kill, things like that. If that's the boss, that's the boss. And honestly, it's probably a lot more powerful than stuff in the bestiary, more so because you can build like against the party. For example, if you know the 4, 5, or in my case the 9 members of your party, if you know that everyone's got a bad will save, suddenly the big bad is a wizard. If you know that
yeah, Tommy,
he's a wizard.
To add another thing from 5th edition, which I did adopt it into my games, is to give my villains layer actions to do on every so number of turns.
Now what is that?
Yeah, just multiple turns in the initiative. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I like that tactic. If you've got a big party and they're all fighting one thing, I think we did this at the end of the game. The only game we've gotten all the way to the end of to 20th with Connor, the game that Connor ran for us, was a 20th level wizard lich. And he had he was gestalted with monk or something, and he got an initiative turn in between every single character.
That's actually really good. I've never thought using that. That's powerful.
Yeah, so every like turn of the wheel, basically I would go and then he would go, and then my friend William would go and then he would go, and then Sabrina would go and then he would go, and then Stephen would go and then he would go, and he just beat the crap out of us.
To add on top of that, for layer actions and additional turns, I usually have area effect spells or just layer action that affect individual party members at every single set amount of turns.
Yeah, and he wasn't even like a huge monster or anything. He was medium sized. He was the same size as everyone else in the party, except for Ark, who was large. And like, he was, because he got it like basically 4 or 5 turns every round. He was sword fighting our sword sage, throwing fireballs at our wizard. Like I think he punched my barbarian in the nuts with vampiric touch. Like, it was like he just beat the shit out of us, and just adding those extra initiative turns, or like Donald said, just having an effect occur that's either part of the terrain or something that was set up beforehand, like like a trap or an automated turret. That just happens, during every pass of the initiative or multiple passes in the initiative, can really add to the longevity of the encounter, or, because the encounter still might only last 3 rounds, but so much more stuff is going to happen in those 3 rounds.
Yeah, I agree for sure. I didn't even think about that. You don't need mooks. Just give your guy like 7 turns in 1 turn, and you're doing great.
I read a poll once. The average combat encounter usually lasts 3 to 4 rounds maximum.
Yeah, so somewhere between 18 and 24 seconds.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I feel like if a combat goes to like 5, 6, 7 rounds, either everyone's missing or there's just a lot of stuff on the board, and that's when people start to like space out. Or I guess it's like the first episode of last Saturday where we're all rolling natural ones. Just like as an aesthetic, we're all rolling really, really bad.
We all suck.
We've hit the hour mark.
I had the excuse that I was blackout drunk.
Yeah, you were blackout drunk. I was doing non-lethal and having memory problems. Donald has a plague doctor's mask and whatever Kuratama wants to say.
He's got a dog face. It's weird.
Yeah.
I blame my mask multiple color lenses.
Yeah, there you go. Anyway, we've hit that hour mark, so we're good. I'm going to go ahead and say that Francis and Lucia each receive an action point for making sure this could happen, and we didn't have to like push it back a week because my schedule is super hairy over here at BDG HQ.
BDG HQ!
Yeah, I love it. Getting all this stuff together. Again, guys, thank you so much for watching. We've got a bajillion giveaways going on the channel. We're running you through the Doomsday Dawn adventure, and we're having you kill your friends at a Pathfinder 1st Edition send-off tournament. The links for both will be in the description. Remember, patronage at any tier gets you an extra entry in both, well, probably in every giveaway, henceforth, forever and ever and ever. As always, do go check out the Inn of Planar Crossroads, the channel who this channel probably couldn't exist without. Adam has been super kind to me for no reason. I used to be just some dude who would spam on his Facebook page, and now these guys are like my best friends on planet Earth.
And now you're infinitely more prolific than us.
Well, that's because 2nd edition. I'm blaming 2nd edition for that one. The hype is real. Literally, as soon as I get off the phone with you guys, I'm going to start working on the cleric video because now alignments are weird, and that's great. Regardless, guys, be sure to like and subscribe for more videos. We'll see you next time. Say bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye. I got to hold up for Adam. There it is.